Hello everyone. If you are listening to this video, then I am assuming that you are someone going through the recess book and you have reached Teaching 14 homework of the book, specifically page 157, where it says in the highlighted pink to turn on the first video in the recess book Teaching 14 homework playlist called In Pursuit of Him. Listen from minutes 44 through 50. Do so now. Well, I have bad news. That original video, In Pursuit of Him, featuring Steffany Gretzinger, that original video no longer exists on YouTube, which is a travesty because the original video was, man, it was so rich in testimony and in encouragement. And so for future, versions of the recess book, we'll remove the reference to that video and, there'll be no confusion. But for the 1,500 of you guys who have the original edition of the hard copy recess book, it references that video 2 times in the lesson. And so I wanted to make this voice note type video to kind of fill in the gaps, to try to paraphrase. I really felt like the stories that she told were worth retelling, even if, just in a paraphrased form. I really think that they're like edifying and fortifying for our spirits. And so I'm going to do my best to, like I said, summarize, fill in the gaps. Like I said, this teaching is going to reference this video twice. Once is on page 157, which I'm assuming you guys have already stumbled upon that first reference. The second reference will be 2 pages over, right near the end of this teaching. It'll tell you to listen to the video again. And so what I'm going to do in this little audio video is I'm going to verbalize when to pause this one, and then you'll continue reading throughout the teaching. And then when you get to the last page of this teaching where it says to play the video again, then you'll just press play from where you left off on this video. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me introduce myself. You might be wondering who I am, who you're listening to. My name is Kallie. I'm the author of the recess book. And I just first off want to say that I just think it's awesome that God led you to the recess journey. And I genuinely mean it when I say that I am praying that what I've seen God do through these teachings in my life and in the lives of so many people around me, I just believe that He will do again. I'll even say to, hang on tight, because the next teaching 15, is a really, really fun one in terms of the testimony of what God does. And so my prayer is that He would start a fire in you and that it wouldn't just stay with you, but that you would let it burn you up and then light the rest of the world around you on fire. So let's go ahead and kind of pick up where the book just left off. You guys had been reading about just this notion that as we worship, that atmosphere of heaven filling the space around you, it's carrying that presence of God, which is able to transform not just your own life, but also the lives of people around you. You read that story about Saul stumbling upon this group of traveling prophets and how the spirit of Jesus that was, filling those prophetic voices, it carried this atmosphere that was transformative, not just for those prophets, but for Saul, a passerby. And so Steffany in her video tells this story. And again, I'm going to hopefully not butcher it, but very much paraphrase it. So, anyway, so the gist of it was that she tells the story of one time way back in the day. She was at home and having a very intimate and holy, beautiful encounter with God, I believe like on her bathroom floor. And in the middle of this encounter, she senses the Holy Spirit, kind of tap on her to get up and to go to church. And I think, again, if I'm remembering all the details correctly, from what I remember, she was already late at this point. She had been in this encounter with God for a while. If you're in those holy places with God, very rarely do you want to get up, get in your car, drive, leave that moment and go somewhere else. Especially if wherever you're going, you're late to the party, you're walking in late. And she was related to the leaders of her church. It was the church that she grew up in with her family. And so it's not like she can just sneak on in. It's, she has bright red hair and she talks about how, she can't really just hide when she gets there. So she obeyed the Lord, and she got up and continued in this encounter with him. And she describes getting into the church and kind of trying to like slink into the back and just stay and remain like tucked in to Jesus and into this holy exchange that they're having. And time goes by, the service goes on, and again, I forget all the, minute details, but the gist of it was that the leaders of the church come up to her at the end. And again, remember, she wasn't walking in like, I'm in an encounter with God, everyone look at me. She came in quiet and humble and tried to hide, right? Just to stay with him. And the leaders come up to her at the end and essentially said, Steffany, like, what was happening with you and God from the moment you walked in? The entire atmosphere of worship in this room shifted. And she says that to say that, a lot of times we feel like we need the microphone to shift the atmosphere of a room. Or, I'm like reminding myself, like this is strengthening me as I'm saying it. But yeah, we feel like we need the platform, or we feel like we need the microphone, or we feel like we need to be given the keys to prophesy over the room or over the congregation or something. But really, it's not about necessarily the like overt leading of worship. It's about the choice to worship. And that if you will choose, wherever you are in the room, wherever you are in life, if you will choose to worship, the power of that choice, it's almost like a ripple effect, is that as you're cultivating that atmosphere in you, it then he inhabits the praises around you, right? And that's able to shift the atmosphere of a room far beyond just the atmosphere of your own heart, right? And that story, it was so, I remember hearing it for the first time and feeling really marked by it, because in that season, I was also just wrestling with why, the people around me or the believing community that God had put me in, why no one else seemed to be hungering for his presence. And so a lot of times in that place of like when you're first starting to burn with passion and you don't totally have the maturity like worked out in you yet, like your passion can kind of get the best of you, and you can want to just, yell or shout or grab your church leader or whoever, your Bible study leader, and we got to go after these things. And that may be true. And, we'll kind of get there in the second reference for the In Pursuit of Him video near the end of the teaching. I'll pick back up on that in a moment. But really, I think before those other steps are ever taken, what I loved about her testimony and what I've internalized over the years is that what matters even more than me saying something to someone else is that I would choose, like I said, right where I am, whether I'm in the front row or the back row or wherever, or the prayer team, not involved, not known, whatever it is, that I would choose to worship, and that would be my priority. And then I would, almost like a seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and everything else will be added unto you. If you will become kind of a magnet for heaven, that idea of, the eyes of the Lord are searching the earth looking for those who are devoted to him. If you'll become this resting place that he can focus in on, and that magnetism of heaven connecting to you on earth, then it starts to change things around you. You saw that when Jesus walked. He walked connected to heaven, and it drew this crowd around him. And yeah, I've lived that. I've seen that. It's not always as smooth of a transition as the story that Steffany shares. You're not always going to be met with gratitude necessarily from those who notice that shift in the atmosphere, but nonetheless, God notices it, and that's really what we're going after, is his pleasure, not man's, right? So at this point, you can go ahead and pause this video, continue reading together through Teaching 14 homework, and then 2 pages over on page 159 in the in summary section, you will see a bolded text that says, listen to what worship leader Steffany Gretzinger says in that same YouTube video we watched just a bit ago. Listen from minutes 39 through 44, do so now. So instead of doing that, just press play where you left off on this video, and I will do my best to paraphrase what she said in that section of the original video. We meet again. All right, so bear with me for a few more minutes. So this this last reference to the In Pursuit of Him video with Steffany, this is probably one of the portions that I'm most sad that you won't get to listen into her original language. The real heart of what she says in that portion is, it's kind of where I was touching on earlier, of really speaking to the ones of you who are really, man, God is moving in you through this journey, through other things in your life, lighting you on fire, giving you this hunger for His presence and His preeminence. And you're looking around and you're like, why is no one else getting this? Or, you read the Tozer quote in this teaching, in teaching 14, about, current evangelism has, laid all these things on the altar, but there's no fire. You read things like that and you're like, yes, this is describing my experience and I am enraged with righteous conviction and indignation. If that is you, and I know that won't be where everyone's at, but if that is you, oh my goodness, I get you, I relate to you. And that's really what Steffany speaks into. And honestly, she probably said it in a lot more fiery way than I might right now. Catch me on a different day in a different moment, I might have a little bit of a sharper sword. Right now I feel more in a velvet hammer type of a place, but I'll just try to be brief. There are absolutely times where God will ask you to go to, let me say it this way, there will be moments where God will send you to a leader or a mentor or an authority. And in humility, He will ask you to sit down and to share what is on your heart, for you to open up the Word, to share your conviction and your longing for more, for whether it's your friend group or your family or your community, your church, your worship team, so on and so forth. Ideally, any time that dynamic were to happen, it would be done with this deep sense of humility, reverence, and ultimately love for your leadership in your congregation, right? More often than not, though, what happens is, as God is giving us knowledge of the more of Him, we slip out of love and we slip into what 1 Corinthians talks about, where it says, love builds up, but knowledge puffs up. And we end up getting puffed up in knowledge about, worship and praise and His presence and all of these things. And we're no longer in this posture of actually loving someone. We're in this posture of wanting things to change, but also really feeling that we are right and they are wrong, if that makes sense. And so we end up becoming really, rebellious is a strong word, but maybe I would say, in this place of defiance, ungratitude, sometimes bitterness, and definitely sometimes rebellion against the authority that God has put around us. And we can be grumbling against our leadership, our pastors, our worship pastor, stemming from a longing for more, but then again, it's slipping out of a place of purity. And, when we do talk to our pastors, it can be from this place of rightness rather than righteousness, if that makes sense. And one of Steffany's main things and corrections to the impassioned ones, is to say that, sure, there might be a time and place where out of obedience, God might ask you to talk with someone, but more often than not, what He's going to ask you to do is to contend in prayer. If you will worship, then God will do the rest. If you will pray in the private place, then God will reward you in the public place. A lot of times we jump to the conclusion that God needs to use us to speak something when it's not stemming from this place of actually having worked it out in the secret place with God, of letting our hearts actually be erect into a place of love so that when we speak, it is coming from His love. And having God work out love in your heart takes a lot more time than working out what you're going to say to someone to prove them wrong, So that's really just where I would come in and offer, if I may, wisdom, counsel, maturity, whatever, just perspective, that if you are in a place where you feel like God is yearning for more in terms of the pursuit of His presence and the community of believers that you're in, then I would challenge you to take the next 3 months to not say a single thing to anyone, to not grumble, to not complain, but to take all of your grievances to the Lord, who, if that is actually true, then he has been grieved way longer than you have been. He is longing more than you could ever imagine for his people to know the fullness of his love, right? And his glory. Like, that is what he's been longing for since he sent his son. That's what he's been longing for since the garden. Like, he is grieving and jealous and yearning for this more than you, but he alone knows the strategy of how to move and shift and shape atmospheres towards and for his glory. And so I would challenge you to take 3 months minimum to let him work it out in you, work out his love, work out his longing, work out his strategy, his wisdom, his approach, his methodology long before you go and say anything to anyone. Like, the last thing that we need to add is division. Like, the greatest thing we can do is be unified to the Father of unity, and then become this glorious weapon that can tear down strongholds and lofty arguments against the knowledge of God and usher in a move of revival, reformation, or glory. And so, man, honestly, even if y'all were to finish your recess group, if you're doing this with a group of people, and you said, if y'all all are like, man, my church or my community group or my family or my friend, whatever, like, there's so much more we're missing stuff. Like, then I would say take the next 3 months, show up, don't complain about it together, get on your faces before God and let God speak to you, right? It's like the concept of fasting, that you would tuck away and deny your earthly, fleshly desire to go and say something for the sake of righteousness, but to let him work out righteousness in you. Like, that, man, that moves God. That moves God. So I digress. And again, I'm hoping that makes sense. But yeah, so I just bless you guys as you move into the activity portion of this teaching. I bless you as you move into the final segment of this book and this journey. And I bless you guys to walk out your passion in all humility, in all eagerness, in all love. Love you guys. Hope to meet you at some point. And I know that we'll see each other, on the other side at least.